continue the conversation here in the studio, Nigeria, we know, is a major signatory to Abuja Declaration of Heads of Government, which resolved to adopt a minimum of 15% of national health budget of all its members. And yet we have not exceeded 6% of that number when we talk about that. And that since 2001, that declaration was taken. And today we see medical tourism as a major challenge. How do we stop, medical tourism outside the shores of Nigeria and promote Nigeria as a hub for medical tourism? That's the focus of our discussion right now. And we have an expert here joined us in the studio to talk further about this crucial issue. Please help us welcome Dr. Douglas Emeka Okor. He's a consultant brain and spine surgeon from Brain and Spine Surgery Consortium, Abuja. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks.
Now, with your wealth of experience, spending about 11 years outside the shores of Nigeria and looking at Nigeria as a whole today and our health sector, what would you say about medical tourism?
I think the key thing, Ruth, starting is talking about what healthcare actually means to the different strata of human beings in Nigeria. So definitely we'll start with the political class first and the government. What does healthcare mean? Now, there are key issues of what I call the value for human life. Now, until the value for human life becomes a mainstream socio-political issue, we are going to be struggling with healthcare. Healthcare is so fundamental and it's supposed to be a key priority. But unfortunately, healthcare is not a major priority in Nigeria. Now we have to start trending towards that. Okay, so if you look at countries like UK, for example, we have spent the last 11 years, America, most of the European countries, healthcare is very central. In America, they always talk about Obamacare and stuff like that, and we in our news we beam it on air and talk about that. In the UK, whenever they're having any campaigns to change their government or anything, the National Health Scheme, the NHS, is a mainstream issue that they talk about. So we need to start moving towards that in Nigeria. So that's so critical. Medical tourism, people going outside Nigeria, spending almost $1 billion annually outside Nigeria. Lots of foreign exchange and stuff like that. If you can trap at least 70% of that money in Nigeria, you create a value chain across board where you have local businesses developing. That can even help other businesses like hoteling, transportation, our airspace and stuff like that. So it's large. Now, why is this medical tourism? Of course, human beings will always want the best service and go for the best service. Okay? Now, when you're not talking about healthcare, which is talking about life and limb and health, people will do whatever they can to go there. Now, over the years, since maybe like in the last 40 years or so, you've seen the healthcare system in Nigeria dwindle and actually go down and down and down. And there's no need for me to go through all that. We all know the reasons why this has happened. Poor leadership and stuff like that. So that's what I'll say for now.
Okay, now it's good that you said poor health care system is actually one of the reasons why a lot of people go out to seek for a better alternative outside the shores of Nigeria. But is that enough reason? What about orientation and all of that?
I think when you definitely but I think the key thing here, Suleiman, is that once the people of any group of people have lost faith in something, they will always seek for alternatives, and that's basic. Okay. Now, repeating what I just said, because the healthcare system in Nigeria has actually failed Nigerians over the years and has gotten really to a very bad state. I'm sure you have family members who have been to, especially our public hospitals, and you know what things are like. Okay, so once you've gotten to that point, definitely people will find ways to actually help and enable themselves. And so that's why the medical tourism thing has come, especially to places like India, where they feel that it's much cheaper than compared to places like UK or America and stuff like that. So yeah, when it comes to orientation, when it comes to the issues of even religion, which is giving us a major problem, okay, where because again people have lost faith, people have to hope in something.
And so, talking about losing, we keep losing billions of dollars yearly. People still go to India that you mentioned.
Yes.
And now, what would you say are the major challenges, mitigating against this?
Okay, the first one I've talked about already. So there's what I call the leadership issue, the issue of actually making healthcare a mainstream priority. From your introduction, you talked about the 15% of the budget, and we're still not meeting that because politically, we've not stated that, we've not come to that point where we say yes, healthcare is a priority. It's a major priority for all governments, for private individuals and human beings. And the problem is that the leadership of a country is like the father or the parent of a country. And the followers are like the children. So the children learn from the parents or from the leaders. Okay? So because healthcare is not a major issue or priority for the government, it's not a major issue for the average human being as well, or the average person in Nigeria.
A lot of people will bet to disagree with you. If you said it's not a major priority, health, they say, is wealth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and once in our lifetime, we must fall ill. So what is the problem, really?
The problem is multifocal. There are lots of things that are the problems. There's the issue of, like I said, religion. There's the issue of the political class and how they prioritize whether they think healthcare is a priority. There's the issue of education. There's the issue of information and knowledge.
What about expertise?
There's definitely the issue of expertise and capacity on the ground as well. And when I talk about capacity, I usually talk about four things. Okay, we talk about things like experience, knowledge, skill, and competence.
Do we have it?
We do have it, but not in the numbers needed. So I'll give you an example. So in the UK, for example, you have at least up to about 250,000 doctors registered in the General Medical Council, which actually regulates doctors. Okay, the population of UK is 6.4 million at tops. In Nigeria, I'm sure we are trending towards about 190 million people. Statistics are saying 180 million or thereabout. Registered on the Medical and Dental Council, in terms of number of doctors, I don't think it's more than 60,000, and that includes all the doctors who are outside Nigeria as well. So physically on ground in Nigeria, you don't have more than tops 45,000 doctors. Okay, so there's also the issue of numbers to actually deliver the kind of care that we want to deliver in Nigeria. So definitely capacity is an issue, plus all the other things I've talked about as well.
Well, Dr. Okor, you said, or rather it is on record, that Nigeria lose about $1 billion annually to medical tourism. Incidentally, that's the same amount of money the Minister of Health said Nigeria needs in order to stop this phenomenon. Now, let's look at the private sector. In what way can we leverage on this in order to fix the healthcare system in Nigeria, in order to attract medical tourism into the country?
So, Suleiman, fantastic question. Key issues here. Number one, what has the private sector been doing so far in Nigeria? I can say in the last almost 6 to 10 years, they've been doing an absolutely fantastic job. Now, one of the key issues that I talked about when Ruth asked me some questions, that was about the issue of information and knowledge. And I'm so happy that we are here talking about this today, because one of the key issues is about empowering the average Nigerian with knowledge and information about where things are happening. The private initiatives have come on board so strong in the last 6 to 10 years, like I said. And there's a particular word I use for them, the real private sector in healthcare.
Okay.
And I like to use that word, real,
Why real?
Commas, because there's the private sector that are not really doing a good job, but there's that part of the private sector that are really blazing the trail when it comes to delivering top-class, complex tertiary healthcare. And I'll explain what that means. Now, when you look at our priorities for healthcare, especially looking at the key actors within the Ministry for Health, you find out that most of the things that we concentrate on are the things that the donor organizations sponsor or provide donor funding for. Okay? Now, are these key public health issues? Yes, they are. And I'll give you examples of these things. Malaria, tuberculosis, polio, HIV. They are key issues, and there's no doubt that we should prioritize them. But the problem is that because there's some sort of influence from the donor, from these donors, these international donors, we are leaving other issues that are also major priorities, major public health issues as well. And I'll give you examples. Over the years, especially since 1999, when the democratic rule started in Nigeria, there's been a build-up of the middle class. And do you know what that means? Once you have an increase of middle class, you have people wanting to behave like the Westerners. And you know these gadgets you hold in your hand, these phones, iPads and stuff like that, lots of information. So people in countries like Nigeria, other West African countries, other sub-Saharan African countries want to behave like their Western counterparts. So what does that mean? You have more fast food joints in Nigeria and stuff like that. So what does that mean? You now have new emerging medical conditions that you wouldn't have had before. Obesity, high blood pressure, diabetes. brain tumors, kidney problems, and stuff like that. So
you mentioned something very critical, knowledge, and that is something you're divulging here for us.
Absolutely.
And we've seen great minds who are Nigerians, record great strides outside the shores of Nigeria.
Yeah.
And what is stopping them from coming back home to contribute their own quota, like you are doing now, contributing your own quota, which you're very passionate about, making Nigeria a hub for medical tourism?
Coming back to Nigeria, you have to have a lion's heart. I will say that first of all. Now, why are these guys who are doing a fantastic, brilliant job outside Nigeria, why are they not coming back to Nigeria in their droves? It's all about creating an enabling environment. Okay, now what happened in India was over the last 30 years or so, you had lots of Indians going to places like America, Canada, UK, Australia, and they had this accumulation of massive knowledge and capacity. And what happened was at some point, the leadership, politicians in India now said, oh, there's space here to do healthcare business and to actually create a platform for medical tourism into India. And then they created a platform for these people who had built this capacity outside the shores of their country. And then now India is a major destination for tourism. As Nigeria, do we have something to learn from that? Oh, yes, we do. So you see, it still keeps going back to the politicians and the people in leadership, both at federal and state levels.
Now,
okay?
Dr. Okor, you recently in a publication, an article you wrote which you titled "The Nigerian Healthcare Revolution Has Begun." My experience. What has been your experience?
So my experience has been, number one, I now appreciate why the average Nigerian doesn't trust whatever is happening in Nigeria when it comes to healthcare. Okay, that's number one. Number two, the public health sector, forgive me, is in a mess. And why is this? It's clear because the public sector in Nigeria generally, has issues. And I know there's been lots of talk about trying to reform the public sector and stuff like that. The other things that I've noticed is that the real private sector is doing a fantastic job, but the problem is that people in Nigeria, the average Nigerian, still doesn't know that these things are happening in Nigeria.
But even if they know, access is another thing. They are expensive, and that's why, just like you said earlier, a lot of people opt to go out to India, the likes of India, in order to seek for this medical attention.
Yes. So you now talk of costs, and then you talk of comparative costs. Okay. Before I go to that, let me talk about something. So healthcare, there are three key issues in healthcare. You talk about availability, you talk about affordability, and you talk about accessibility. Okay? Now, what the real private sector that I talk about, these guys that are doing a fantastic job in Nigeria, what they can provide for you in the short term is availability. Okay? So what we are saying is that a significant number of people going to India, UK, don't need to do that. Okay? And comparative in terms of costs, the amount of money that an individual or a family will spend in India or UK or America is nowhere near, definitely much, much more than what you will spend in Nigeria, talking about these real private sector players. And I'll give you an example. Doing a brain surgery in the UK, for example, can cost you an arm and a leg. In pounds, it can cost you up somewhere between 25 to 70,000 pounds.
And if we can afford it, because we see people go there to afford it.
Absolutely.
So why can't we do that here?
That's what I'm saying. Most of these are happening in Nigeria already, but most Nigerians don't know that they are happening. And
is it a problem of awareness, lack of awareness?
It's a problem of awareness. It's a problem of where we've been for a very long time because people have lost faith. And that's why creating this platform to actually tell people that these things are actually happening in Nigeria.
So do we need a collaboration with the health government sector and the private sector if we must create that awareness?
You stole the words out of my mouth, Ruth. Okay. Because that's the key thing. Because I keep hearing the key actors within the federal ministry are talking about reversing medical tourism. We know that the public sector is struggling. But then you have these private sector players who are blazing the trail and doing an absolutely fantastic job when it comes to providing complex healthcare. So the question in my head is, why have the key actors in the Federal Ministry of Health, for example, and other key actors, why are they not reaching out to these private sector players and saying, oh, you guys are doing so well, you guys have the experience and stuff like that. Can we all sit down and see what we can do?
Because in the end, it's for the benefit of Nigeria and Nigerians.
Absolutely. And then the other key issue is about leading by example. A very big thumbs up to Idris Wada, the former governor of of Kogi State. When he had his accident the last time and he fractured his femur, this long bone, and he said he actually went to a private hospital in Abuja and they fixed him. And everybody knew that, oh, so this can be done in Nigeria. So we need that sort of promotion of what we can do in Nigeria. Very, very important.
Okay, now we talk about training and all of that for medical practitioners in
Yes.
Nigeria. How can we, bring that to bear in order to restore the confidence of Nigerians?
I think Ruth talked about one thing, collaboration, very important. We want to see the public and private sector working together much, much more. We want to see the reality of this talk of PPP, public-private partnership. Do you understand? It's not good enough to just put policies on paper. Do you understand? We have to start making these things become real. That's what they call translational research or translational way of doing things, where you actually translate things from paper to reality. And what does that mean? It just needs political will and true passion.
So if
from
we
the key
must
actors.
stem the tide to stop medical tourism outside the shores of Nigeria, do we need a legal framework?
Well, first of all, anything that will be great will start from somewhere small. Okay, so let's start from the small things. Okay. Number one, we talked about information for Nigerians. Okay, we have what we call the National Health Act. You know it? National Health Act, signed by the former president just before he left office. Okay, now the National Health Act, it has 6 parts, and it has sections from 1 to 65. Now I'm going to talk about the part 3, and I'm going to look at the section 23 and section 24. Viewers, please read this. Now, the 23 talks about, basically part 3 talks about rights and obligations of users and healthcare providers within healthcare. Now, the 23 section 23 talks about the rights of a user.
Okay.
And this is a law, right? The act is a law.
Yes.
So that means, and that tells you that a user of any healthcare service must be given information about whatever diagnosis he has, whatever clinical condition he has, whatever diagnosis he has. So that means the healthcare provider